Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Gayatri, and I want to welcome all of us back to Episode 2 of Season 3 for Catalyze Your Self. Today, we're going to focus on the dynamics we face when our inner grounding is lost. This season is continuing our journey of strengthening our mind and our steadiness under pressure by staying strongly connected to ourself regardless of where life can take us. In episode 1, we spend our time on something important, something that set the foundation for the rest of our season. We walked through how pressure can be obvious and dramatic, and it can also be quiet and woven into our everyday life. And when pressure is present over an extended period of time, that a shift can start happening inside of us, inside our mind, inside our nervous system, our body, long before anything changes on the outside in a way that we can easily point to. Now, in episode 2, we will move deeper into one very specific part of that shift. We will focus on what happens when pressure impacts what once felt steady and accessible inside ourselves and starts becoming less available in real time. Before we go any further, let's first spend time ensuring we are very clear about what grounding is in context of our conversation. We know the word grounding is used in so many ways. Literally, it is the phenomenon within science of physics where grounding connects an electrical system to Earth in order to provide a stable reference point for excess charge, excess power to flow through safely. In holistic wellness practices, where we consider our human body itself to contain electrical pulses, we integrate the practice of grounding where you walk on earth barefoot so you can settle the overwhelmed charge within our nervous system. In this season, when we use the word grounding, we are speaking about being internally grounded. Being internally grounded is where our conscious presence of mind allows for a collaborative space where all parts of our mind are working together. Cognition, our emotion, three layers of our consciousness, our conscious, our subconscious, our unconscious, and our nervous system, they're all remaining aligned with what is important to ourself. That alignment with ourself gives us the steady internal grounding to respond to the world in a way with integrity and intentionality. And when that collaborative internal space is not accessible, we do not navigate pressure the same way. Clarity becomes less consistent, discernment takes more effort. The gap between what we sense and how we respond can get much larger. Our inner steadiness starts to feel less reliable in real time. The question for us now is not whether this can ever happen to any one of us. We all experience a loss of connection to who we are at our core, ourself, at some point of time. The question is, how soon can we recognize it? Sooner than later. So we can note the shifts within us at the earliest state when our internal collaboration is not fully available to us in real time. So in this episode, we will slow down and look at this step by step. We will look at what inner ground feels like when it is present and how it becomes less accessible under sustained pressure and what changes inside of us when that collaboration no longer holds the weight it once did. When we speak about internally grounded, we are also speaking about conscious presence of mind, something we have explored in depth in our past seasons. Conscious presence of mind is the state where our thinking, our emotions, our awareness of all layers of our consciousness which would be, of course, our conscious, our subconscious, and our unconscious, are working together in real time with our current moment. It is what allows us to remain aligned with what matters to ourselves, even when navigating pressure. And achieving the state is what internal grounding allows for us. And on the other hand, when that collaborative internal space starts to fracture or shrink, conscious presence of mind becomes so much harder for us to access in the moment, and we become ungrounded. And what does that look like? The most typical way we find our loss of grounding internally is in our relationship with time. We find ourselves being out of sync with it. It could be that we sense being at a standstill and almost seeing time pass by with a feeling of absolute overwhelm. It could be you find yourself increasing pressure on yourself and increasing your pace to try and catch up and still not getting the satisfaction that you've caught up. It could be a sense that there's just not enough time to do all the things that need to be done. When the pressure we face goes past our accustomed threshold and also for an extended period of time, internally, our mind can start falling out of sync. And that is why knowing ourself and our patterns completely can help us catch it sooner than later so we can mitigate it. And fracturing within our mind happens based on our own unique conditioning, based on what has been stored in our subconscious patterns. So emotions may surge ahead of awareness or reflection. Cognition with logic may override our emotions. Our awareness may arrive way after the fact, and recognizing what has already occurred rather than guiding what is about to unfold. Our nervous system can feel threatened by this lack of synchronicity and trust within our mind and adapt to the subconscious patterns that may not be the best for the moment we are in. When we have not developed strengthening strategies to catch it early and mitigate it, when our mind fractures in the face of pressure, conscious presence of mind becomes inconsistent and harder to sustain. When our mind does not feel trust, what changes next is how we move through our own decisions. Our choices that once formed with a sense of internal alignment can now feel heavier. The clarity that used to come before action may now arrive during or even after what we have already done and responded to. We may notice that we are still functioning, we are still engaging, still handling what is required, yet something about our internal experience is now less steady. This shift can show up in little moments like a pause that now feels uncertain versus confident before a response, intentional before a response. It could be a decision that we made that makes logical sense and still does not feel right afterwards. It could be a conversation that may look successful on the outside, while internally we are walking away feeling not so good about it. And what may end up happening over time can be this fractured internal experience starts influencing how we relate to ourselves. Our space between sensing and responding becomes less reliable. Our internal confirmation that we have chosen the right next step now feels delayed. Mentally getting aligned with self now seems like a lot more effort. What this can look like is a subtle increase in second guessing, simply because we no longer consistently hearing ourselves before we respond. We begin to question our internal timing. We begin to question our own interpretations. We begin to question whether what we see, understand, and sense is valid in the moment, especially when pressure is present. It can show up as a simple decision that normally would not have required much thought. It could be a conversation that needed to happen, a message that needed to be sent, a boundary that needed to be communicated. When we are not under pressure, we may have sensed clearly what needed to be said and when. Now, we may find ourselves delaying it, rewriting it, rehearsing it, because we don't feel the same internal steadiness we used to feel before. And on the other hand of the spectrum, it can show up as the opposite. We may say something quickly, only to reflect afterwards and think that it wasn't something I should have said or did. We may start thinking, did it come through exactly as I wanted it to? We'll start second guessing everything we did. When we do not catch these internal shifts and it continues over time, this can begin to affect our identity in a quiet way. We may still see ourselves as capable and competent because we are, and yet we may also notice that our relationship with our own self now feels less reliable when we are under pressure. We may begin to feel like we are operating from effort instead of alignment, from performance instead of presence. And all of this will typically start showing up in how we relate to the world around us. It may not start off bringing very obvious ways to our notice, not always in ways other people can immediately point to. It will be in the quality of our presence, in our tone, in our timing, and how much of ourselves is actually available in the moment. It could be that someone asks a question and we respond, and our response is coming from urgency than presence of mind. We may not be unkind, we may not be inappropriate, but we can feel that we are not fully there. We are answering where our mind has already moved to something else or something that's coming next because our nervous system is in a way vigilant under the pressure. Our shifts can also show up in relationships that require emotional capacity. We may notice we are less available for nuance, less patient with complexity, less willing to stay in the middle of a conversation that needs time to unfold. And this has nothing to do with how much we care. This is simply because the presence of mind that gave space in ourselves for our mind to stay aligned and stay present is not fully accessible in that moment. When inner ground becomes less accessible, the external world begins to feel louder. Relationships can feel more demanding. Leadership can feel more intense. Regardless of whether we are leading our life or leading teams, this is where misinterpretations and misunderstandings can begin to increase. When we are not internally grounded, we are more likely to hear through pressure. We're more likely to interpret tone as threat. We're more likely to feel urgency as necessity. We're more likely to contain ourselves too tightly or express ourselves too intensely. And this can create relational consequences that do not always match our intent. We may leave a meeting and recognize we were present physically, but not present internally. We may realize we spoke to move things forward rather than to build understanding. We may notice that we avoided something important because we didn't have the internal steadiness to hold that particular conversation. Or we may have noticed none of these. It may be others around us that experienced it instead. When we are internally grounded, we can hold complexity in relationships without losing ourselves. When we lead with steadiness, we can communicate with clarity. We can respond consciously, even when pressure is present. And so the question for us is not whether we lose our inner ground ever. We are human beings, and this can absolutely happen to any one of us. The question is whether we can catch that shift sooner than later so we can come back to being grounded sooner than later. Let me share a scenario I went through recently so we can go through the experience of catching the shift within us together. Within one of the projects I'm working on, I started recognizing the buildup of conflict between a couple of key players that could derail the strategic direction of the entire project. I recognized that I needed to ensure support for both of these individuals. And to that end, I spoke with the person whose role was to do exactly that. However, once I articulated the key indicators that showed we needed to mitigate and offered my support for the mitigation, the response I received was unexpected in that moment for me. This individual started explaining to me what it takes to mitigate conflict, the preconditions like trust and respect that needed to exist already in order for me to be able to support, and how it would be inappropriate for me to support. So as I listened to this pushback, I could feel my internal regulation fracturing. I could feel my mind and body start to respond to being underestimated and being told what I am and what I'm capable of, which is not reflecting the reality of me at all. And I found myself pausing into the awareness of this shift. I could see my response was based on how my nervous system once felt when I was underestimated. The times when I came to the table with trust and respect and I did not receive the same back. The times when my capabilities and my depth of experience were not seen and recognized. And this awareness reminded me my grounding comes from intent to support and my experience and knowledge. This was my self-inspiration. Another person's perspective of the same does not change it. This was my space to determine how I expressed my response in that moment. And I found myself staying calm, thanking them for their time and consideration, and that I will keep my influence within the scope of the role I played in the project. Once I ended the call, what I noted more than anything else is how calm I felt. That interaction did not change how I felt about myself. I instead felt gratitude for the opportunity where this person showed me who they were and how they were navigating the world. This entire sequence unfolded in seconds to a minute. And this is how catching the shift in real time can look in ordinary moments of our lives. It does not require perfection. It does not require extensive time. It does not require calm. It requires noticing when internal collaboration has shifted and allowing our awareness, our inspiration, our regulation, our expression and alignment to re-enter the moment. And whenever that catching of the internal shift happens, early or late, that is the moment our return to inner ground begins. And this is where strengthening of our mind to remain steady under pressure begins. Each time we catch the shift, whether seconds after it happens or minutes later, we are strengthening our ability to remain steady under pressure. The earlier we notice our internal shift, the sooner the collaboration of all parts of our minds can return. And sooner the collaboration of our mind returns, the less momentum pressure gains inside of us. And over time, this changes how our mind responds to pressure. Catching the shift once builds awareness. Catching it consistently builds steadiness. This is not about eliminating pressure. It is about reducing the duration of time our mind remains disconnected, ungrounded, fractured in a non-collaborative state. And with that, we come to the close of Season 3, Episode 2 of Catalyze Yourself. In this episode, we took the time to clarify what it truly means to be internally grounded. We walked through how inner ground is not simply calmness or control, but a collaborative internal space where our thinking, our emotions, our awareness, and our nervous system are working together in real time. And we looked closely at what begins to happen when that collaboration loosens under sustained pressure. We explored how that shift can show up in our relationships with time, in our decisions, in our sense of self-trust, and how we relate to the people around us. And most importantly, we focused on the moment that matters. The moment we catch the shift inside of us, because strengthening our steadiness under pressure does not come from never losing our inner ground. It comes from recognizing when we have drifted and returning sooner than we ever would have in times before. The more we practice catching that internal shift, the more quickly we notice it. And the more quickly we notice it, the less distance forms between who we are at our core and how we respond in real time. And over time, this is how our mind becomes stronger, steadier under pressure. And before we move forward, I want to share a couple of reflective considerations for us to sit with. The first is, where have we noticed our inner ground becoming less accessible recently? And the second is, when we did notice it, how long did it take to return back to our internal grounded self? And if this conversation resonated, I invite you to stay connected with me so we can continue strengthening this work together. Share your reflections or experiences through the platform you're listening from. Your insights add depth to our collective journey. And coming next in episode 3, when speed lacks direction, we will look closely at how increasing pace under pressure can feel productive while quietly pulling us further away from alignment when it is not guided by conscious presence of mind. Thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Gayatri, and let us continue strengthening our mind, stay connected to ourselves as we move through our lives.